Right now, as you watch this, your brain is lying to you about something so fundamental you've never even thought to question it. Time. You assume it flows steadily. 1 second, then the next, like beads on a string, perfectly even, perfectly real. But that's not what's happening inside your skull. Time, as your brain experiences it, is not a clock. It's a construction. And the moment you understand how your brain actually builds the feeling of time passing, you'll never trust a single second of your own perception again. Let's start with something strange. Close your eyes right now and try to estimate 10 seconds. Count them in your head. Most people are off by 2 or 3 seconds in either direction, sometimes more. If time were truly steady inside your brain, this would be impossible. A clock doesn't get confused about 10 seconds. But your brain isn't a clock. It's a storyteller. And it tells the story of time differently depending on what's happening to you. Here's the first piece of evidence. Neuroscientist David Eagleman ran an experiment where he dropped volunteers from a height of over 150 feet into a safety net, a genuinely terrifying free fall, and asked them afterward how long the fall felt. Every single person overestimated the actual duration, some by as much as 36%. Time hadn't actually slowed down. The fall took exactly as long as physics dictated. But their brains had recorded more of it. More memory, more detail, more density packed into the same number of real-world seconds. And when your brain plays that memory back, it feels like time slowed down, because there's simply more there to experience. This is the secret nobody tells you about time perception. Your brain doesn't measure time directly. It infers time from how much information it processed. The more vivid, novel, or threatening an experience is, the more your brain encodes, and the longer that period feels in retrospect. This is why a single terrifying car accident that lasted 4 seconds can feel, in memory, like it stretched for a full minute. Your brain wasn't watching a clock. It was building a denser memory file, and density gets misread as duration. Now flip it around. Think about a boring meeting, a long commute you've done 1,000 times, an afternoon spent scrolling without really noticing anything new. These moments feel like they evaporate, because your brain isn't encoding much. Nothing novel is happening, so almost nothing gets stored. And here's the cruel twist: in the moment, routine time feels slow and draggy, but in memory, it compresses into almost nothing. This is why a familiar week can feel endless while you're living it, yet vanish entirely when you try to remember it a month later. Psychologists call this the holiday paradox. Vacations packed with new experiences feel like they fly by while you're on them, but expand enormously in memory afterward, while routine weeks at home feel the opposite, slow to live, but gone the moment they're over. Your brain isn't recording time. It's recording change. And it mistakes the amount of change for the passage of time itself. This gets even stranger when you look at how your brain handles time across your entire life. Ask anyone over 50 why time seems to speed up as they age, and you'll usually get a shrug, an assumption that it's just how getting older works, an unavoidable fact of biology. But there's a real mechanism behind it, and it connects directly back to novelty. When you're 5 years old, nearly everything is new. Your first day of school. The first time you ride a bike. A new flavor of ice cream feels like a genuine event. Every single day is packed with fresh information, so your brain is encoding constantly, building dense, detailed memory files almost non-stop. A single summer as a child can feel like it lasted forever, because in terms of stored experience, it basically did. But by the time you're 40, you've already had thousands of mornings that look almost identical to each other. The brushing of teeth, the commute, the routine conversations. Novelty has dropped off a cliff, and so has the rate at which your brain encodes new memories. Fewer dense memory files means each year compresses into a thinner slice of your remembered life. This is sometimes called the proportional theory of time perception. A year feels shorter at 40 than at 5, not just because of habit, but because that year is a smaller proportion of your accumulated novel experiences relative to your whole life so far. Combine that with simple declining novelty, and you get the unmistakable sensation that time is accelerating, even though every year, mathematically, contains exactly the same number of days. This is why people who deliberately break their routines, who travel, learn new skills, or move to unfamiliar places, often report that life feels like it slows back down. They're not changing the clock. They're forcing their brain to encode more, which is the only lever your mind actually has for stretching subjective time. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling, because so far we've only talked about how fast time feels. We haven't talked about whether your brain experiences the present moment at all. Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet ran one of the most controversial experiments in the history of consciousness research. He asked participants to make a spontaneous decision, like flicking their wrist, whenever they felt the urge, while monitoring their brain activity. What he found was deeply strange. A measurable spike of brain activity, called the readiness potential, appeared in the brain up to half a second before participants reported consciously deciding to act. Your brain, in other words, appears to start the process of acting before your conscious mind reports making the choice. This experiment has been debated for decades, and the interpretation remains controversial, with later research suggesting the readiness potential may reflect background neural noise rather than a hidden decision, rather than free will being an illusion in a simple sense. But what it firmly establishes is this: your conscious experience of now, the feeling that you are deciding and acting in this very instant, is not a live broadcast. It is a delayed, edited reconstruction, assembled by your brain and then presented to you as if it were happening in real time. Neuroscientist Dean Buonomano describes this directly: your brain takes in raw sensory information, processes it, polishes it into a coherent narrative, and only then hands it to your conscious awareness, typically tens to hundreds of milliseconds after the actual event occurred. You are always living slightly in the past, watching a replay your brain is calling now. This isn't a flaw. It's a necessity. Your eyes, ears, and skin send signals to your brain at different speeds. Light hits your retina and reaches your visual cortex almost instantly. Sound takes slightly longer to process. Touch from your fingertips travels a longer physical distance through your nerves than touch from your face. If your brain simply broadcast each sense the moment it arrived, your experience of reality would be a chaotic, desynchronized mess, sound and vision and touch all arriving out of order, your own hand looking like it moved before you felt yourself move it. So your brain does something remarkable. It waits. It collects signals from every sense, lines them up so they feel simultaneous, and only then releases the finished package into your conscious awareness as a single unified now. This editing window appears to be around 80 milliseconds, according to research synthesized by neuroscientists studying multisensory integration. You don't experience reality directly. You experience your brain's tape-delayed broadcast of reality, polished just enough to feel seamless. His is also why a glitch in this system feels so disturbing. Déjà vu, that eerie sensation that you've lived this exact moment before, may occur when your brain's timing gets slightly desynchronized, when a memory processing region briefly fires alongside your present moment perception, tagging a brand new experience with the false stamp of familiarity. You're not actually remembering the future. Your brain's now editor just misfired for a fraction of a second, and you felt the seam. So if your sense of now is a delayed reconstruction, and your sense of duration is just a measure of how much information got encoded, what does that mean for the question we started with? Does time exist inside your brain? The honest answer, based on what neuroscience can currently tell us, is no, not in the way you assume. There is no clock ticking inside your skull, broadcasting seconds in real time. What exists instead is a constant, ongoing act of construction. Your brain gathers fragments of sensory information, arriving at different speeds from different sources, and stitches them into a coherent story it then calls now. It estimates duration not by counting seconds but by measuring how much new information arrived, mistaking density of experience for length of time. And it does all of this slightly after the fact, meaning every single moment you've ever consciously experienced as the present was, technically, already the past by the time you became aware of it. Time, outside your skull, may or may not be as fundamental to the universe as we assume. Physicists are still deeply divided on that question. But time inside your skull is something else entirely. It is not measured. It is manufactured, moment by moment, out of memory, attention, and delay, then handed to you as a finished product so seamless you never even notice the seams. You've spent your entire life trusting that now feels instant, that duration feels even, that your perception of time is the one thing you could always rely on as real-time and accurate. It never was. And once you understand that, you start to see the practical implications everywhere. Why time crawls during a boring lecture but a thrilling trip vanishes in what feels like a blink. Why your most vivid memories tend to cluster around moments of genuine novelty and fear. Why slowing down and deliberately seeking out new experiences is one of the only documented ways to make your subjective experience of life actually feel longer, not through any trick of physics, but by giving your brain more raw material to build a denser sense of time from. Your brain isn't keeping time. It's making it. And every second you've ever felt pass was a story your mind told you, after the fact, about a present that had already disappeared. If this changed the way you think about your own mind, subscribe. Because this is only the beginning.